Meanwhile, the New York Times reporting several prominent Republicans will not support President Trump in November. That includes former President George W. Bush and Senator Mitt Romney. Colin Powell also saying this weekend he will not be voting for the president this year. The president dismissing the criticism in a series of tweets. John Sununu is former White House Chief of Staff to President George H.W. Bush. Governor, good morning.
Morning, Ed. How are you?
Fantastic. You work very closely with General Powell. Of course, we honor his service to this country. But as I recall, he supported Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that didn't quite work out, did it?
Well, not only that, he endorsed President Obama against Mitt Romney in 2012. So, like most of what you read in the New York Times, it's 97% spin, 3% substance. I think President George W. Bush's office said that he had not made up his mind as to who he was going to support this year.
Mitt Romney, I mentioned, he tweeted a photo this weekend. There's some video as well on social media of him marching in Washington at a Black Lives Matter protest. He offered this simple caption, as you see, Black Lives Matter. The president a few moments ago tweeted back and sort of questioned Romney's sincerity. Why can't someone who is a former nominee of the Republican Party speak out however he wants without facing the wrath of this White House?
Of course he can, but the way politics is today, you have to expect even in the softest and most innocuous comment gets commented on by all kinds of folks, from the whole Twitter sphere to the President of the United States. If you put something online, you can expect a response from someone that may have a little bit of bite to it.
Speaking about where we are in 2020, obviously the presidential campaign after COVID, after the recent civil unrest, is finally sort of starting to heat up and shape up. Some polls, national polls. There's a CNN poll that's now finding that Joe Biden allegedly has a 14-point lead. There was an NBC Wall Street Journal poll suggesting that the gap is more narrow. There's a CNN poll, NBC Wall Street Journal poll, only a 7-point gap. Hillary Clinton, again mentioning her, was leading in about all the national polls in 2016, but the president won through the Electoral College.
Look, I think that as much as I don't believe in polls at this time of the year, I think the Trump campaign should take them as an indicator of having to tighten up their campaign. The president likes to riff, to go off message at times, and I think he gets into real trouble when he does that. He's got to understand that this election, like all elections, depends on both substance and style. And unfortunately, I think in the last couple of tough issues that he's had to deal with, he's lost control of his style to the point where he may be attractive to his base, but the swing voter, the voter that he needs to bring back, as he did in the 2016 election, really looks at style, sometimes even more than they look at substance.
Well, you're making an interesting point, because right now the context, of course, is that there are various reports suggesting, and the president's own housing secretary, Ben Carson, suggested the president may be addressing the nation in some form. We don't know if it'll be an Oval Office address or some sort of speech about race in America. What would be your advice as a former White House Chief of Staff who just said you think maybe the message has gotten away from this White House? What should the president say?
Well, I think he's got to be careful, because I don't think his strongest suit are White House addresses. And even though he's going to do this, they've got to be extremely careful on how they craft the message. And he has to have the if he does it, he has to have the self-discipline to stick to the message and not go off message or off script or off speech if he makes that presentation. Look, he has to talk to if he wants to talk to the nation, he has to talk about the fact that he recognizes there has to be reform in some police departments, has to acknowledge that the Minneapolis department had a problem, but he also has to talk about the fact that he cares about the reality of peace and tranquility in the minority communities across the country, and that will not happen without the assistance of the police force, and that it is his concern about peace and tranquility in minority communities that is an important part of his assessment of what has to be done.
All right. John Sununu, we appreciate your insight as always. Thank you.